Well, this is exciting.
Yeah.
That we're because we got Tim Bray with us, who wrote a terrific blog entry on why he's leaving Twitter, and it feels very fitting that we are doing this in our first post Twitter space Discord. Whatever noun we're gonna apply to this. So Tim, have you used Twitter Spaces at all?
A couple times, yeah. One of yours, actually.
Oh, there you go.
How could we forget? Right.
How could we have forgotten? Right.
I forget what the subject was.
Did you? Was it us complaining about some technical difficulty with Twitter Spaces, which is approximately 20% of the content? I feel was us actually, and there's still a Twitter Space that I know that I think that Ian and Jay may even be here. They run a Twitter Space. And Adam, you will not be surprised to learn that Twitter Spaces seems to be doing worse with 1/8 of the employees or whatever they have at Twitter, and they were getting even weirder problems, I think, in their most recent Twitter Space. So I feel we've made the right decision.
Right. Good decision to ripcord when we did.
Exactly. But so Tim, first of all, thanks for joining us. And I was correct me if I'm wrong. But I view you as leading the charge on explaining why blogging was important to Sun execs in 2003. When was that? Is that a correct read of history?
I'm not sure what year that was, but sometime around then. Yeah, it was a new idea at the time.
Totally new idea, because I realized I've been reading ongoing for a long time, because you've been blogging for 20 years, probably close to it at this point, right?
Next February, 20 years.
Next February, 20 years. Okay, so one question that I definitely have for you is: do you think that getting out of this kind of short form narrative in Twitter is going to lead to more long form narrative? Are we going to see a resurgence of blogging, do you think, a little bit?
Maybe, I don't know. In my mind, the short form category feels distinct from blogging. I think the short form category, which Twitter proved could be interesting, even when it was only 140 characters, allowed you to have relatively high velocity conversations on things that were happening right now. It felt a little bit ephemeral, evanescent even, and that was okay. If you're talking about, the World Cup or some concert you're at or a keynote you're listening to or something like that, short form is just fine. And I never have had any doubts about whether something I want to say would fit better on a blog or just blurt it out on Twitter. So they occupy two categories in my mind. Now, perhaps my mind has been formed by the availability of technology, but that's how it feels to me.
And were you an early adopter of Twitter? I got to imagine that you were. When did you discover Twitter, and when did you start using it?
Well, I got Tim Bray, so I must have been on there pretty early.
Right.
I think it was early 2007 or something like that.
That would make sense. I feel that certainly in the period that you and I were colleagues at Sun, and just in general as I've known you over again now 2 decades, I feel that you have always been, I always pay really sharp attention when you're an adopter of something, because over and over again, I've seen you be a leading indicator of a trend. Remember, you got into Ruby in 2005, if I'm remembering correctly. I feel like I watched the DHH Rails video because you recommended it. You made the case for blogs inside of Sun, which Adam and I were both bloggers inside of Sun. Very grateful for that. You were definitely on the leading indicator there. And then the other thing I gotta say, you were on the leading indicator for it, Adam. I don't know if you remember this, but so all three of us were together at Sun when Oracle acquired the company, and Tim, you were one of the first people. Like moments after the acquisition closed, you're like, I've seen this movie before, I'm leaving. And I remember at the time thinking, I think this could be different. And then mere weeks later being like, note to self, if Tim heads for the exit, follow him.
You're almost right. I actually exited about 15 minutes before the acquisition. I was never an Oracle employee. But
you're never an Oracle. Oh, you kept yourself pure.
Wow, really got out, saw it coming even before it hit.
It was a mildly funny story. Let me take 3 minutes and tell it because it's amusing. So the word came down that we were going to be acquired. And, I was in the software CTO office and I kept asking, well, what am I going to do? And nobody knew. And I never got a straight answer. And the thing was, for people at our level, there was a pretty fat payout for if they didn't offer you a job. So I was fine with that too. It would come to like 18 months worth of salary. And so I was greedy and hung on, even though nobody was telling me what the job was going to be. And then about a week before closing, my VP, who was Jeet, what was his name? Jeet Call, called me and said, "Hey, good news! You're going to be working with James Gosling." I said, "Okay, well that's cool." So I pinged James and say, "Hey, James, what's up?" He said, "No, nobody told me what the fuck's up. Nobody told me." So James and I were both equally irritated, and I badgered the VP, and he still couldn't say anything definite. So I quit at the very last second, and because of that reason, God punished me for my greed, and I didn't get the severance either. Oh well.
I think that is you, but you kept yourself pure and certainly wise in my view. Because I remember you saying, I've seen this movie before. I know how this is going to unfold, and you were right. I mean, you were even righter than you could have imagined that you were, sadly. And I by the time I was leaving in July, I think again you left in February. By the time I was leaving in July, I was without regret or second thought, certainly. And the way that acquisition was such an absolute mess. I think there was a long time where each of us assumed that we personally had been screwed because there'd been no sort of retention paid, and then you realize Oracle didn't pay retention to anybody. They just and I don't know. For me, that was an eye-opening moment. Adam, I don't know if you felt the same way. You're just if coin is the currency of the realm, which it
clearly was, yes.
It's I think I get it. I think you might not value Sun employees. Yes.
Now you're understanding, yes.
Now you get it. So, Tim, I've always paid very close attention to all of the things that you've adopted. You were very outspoken about Amazon and their practices, and very much admired the principled stand you took there. Because the thing is, also you're not a firebrand. You're someone who is willing to see. To my view is you're willing to see nuance and a kind of a moderate middle, but you also are a principled person. And so, do you want to talk a little bit about kind of what led up to this blog entry? I mean, you'd written about Mastodon before, obviously, but it sounded like you had hit a breaking point, as so many had in the last couple of weeks.
Well, I joined Mastodon. Every time a new social network comes along, I join it just on principle to see, hey, what's this all about, right? And I joined Mastodon in 2017. A lot of people did, and it struck me as okay, but kind of unpopulated and clearly not where the action was. So I've had those accounts sitting around, and I think just all of us talking here and most of the people who've dialed in, we've been kind of vaguely nauseated by the way Elon Musk has dealt with this. I don't know if you follow the finance world and Matt Levine's money stuff and so on, just the hilarity of the stupidity with which Elon Musk did the acquisition, on impulse, worth way more than offering way more than it was worth, and then trying to get out of it and losing his ass in court. It was just not good. It wasn't something you wanted to be near. And then there was a second wave of nausea when he actually came in and started talking about, do you realize there's 3,000 RPCs and 2,000 microservices that they should all be just shut down? Right. So it was clear that this was not what I would call good engineering leadership by any means. And then the manifesto about, you don't stick around unless you can show me great code and have a hardcore lifestyle. And a lot of the SREs and so on who actually keep things running don't write code, right? They do valuable work, with scripts perhaps and so on. But so all that stuff just kind of bothered me. And then in my Goodbye Twitter thing, I quoted this piece by Josh Marshall, the well-known, U.S. Progressive blogger who's got a really successful publishing operation over at Talking Points Memo. And he actually drilled down on what Musk was doing. I think this would have been a weekend ago now. It's all been happening very fast, kind of blurring in my mind. So all these ultra right wing scumbags were shouting right wing talking points at him about how Antifa are pedophiles and stuff like that, and Musk was going, "Yep, right, correct analysis," and then CrimeThink. CrimeThink is this anarchist, wild-eyed collective, mostly out of Portland, um, who are really great. Yeah, they talk about sometimes the advantages of burning down police stations and things like that. But it's a witty and good and high quality feed. And they get reported all the time for being dangerous. And the very morning they were banned, they actually got a routine email from Twitter support saying, "Oh yeah, somebody in Germany reported you for being awful, but we looked at it, and you're not breaking any laws, so that's okay." And then Andy Ngo, that's NGO, who is this gutter snipe wastrel provocateur fake reporter, um, launched a bunch of complaints about CrimeThink, saying, "Oh, they're Antifa, they're awful," and so he bounced them later that day. And at that point, it's alt-right. It's not a public company anymore. It's owned by Elon Musk. Elon Musk is playing footsie with the worst kind of alt-right scum. To the extent that we do anything to make Twitter better, it's going to benefit that. No, I'm out of here. And well, simultaneously, Mastodon was perking up and becoming more interesting. And I went over there and started participating. And every time I looked, I had like several hundred more followers. And I heard from some really interesting people about really interesting stuff. And just the whole notion of building social media in a way that's more like email and less like Facebook struck me as essentially a profoundly good idea. And once I finally understood how instances work, that your instance is part of your identity. If you're from faculty.mit.edu or kremlin.ru or rollingstones.com, if that's where your handle is from, well, that says something about you, something interesting. It solves a whole bunch of interesting identity problems in a way that does not require an opaque process by an exploitative capitalist. And it just became really appealing looking at the same time as Twitter made me want to puke. So there you go.
Well, and so one of the things that you highlighted, and I had a piece yesterday that kind of inspired by some of the things that you had said, but as people are talking about alternatives like Post and Hive and Co-host, I think you had the same reaction I had to that, which is actually the centralization here in a venture-backed entity is actually part of the problem. And we're just going to repeat history if we may repeat it a little bit better. I mean, it's hard to be at this point. It would kind of hard to be worse, but we may repeat it a little bit better, but we're going to effectively repeat history with a centralized entity. Is that an accurate read of your perspective?
That is an accurate read. Why would we jump, if this one particular capitalist enterprise has gone bad, why would we jump to another and hope that it would be better? But, there's another point on top of that, which is it's just not going to work. I mean, Twitter managed to do an unthinkably impressive thing, which was concentrate like a high proportion of the really interesting voices in the world in one place and give them to everybody for free. In extremely short form fashion. Nobody could have predicted that. And it was a profoundly lucky historical accident. And does anybody think that it could be repeated by, some other startup? The idea is ridiculous.
Totally lucky. And I think in so much of what Twitter became that way because of the users and the direction that it was taking, whether it was the character limit or retweets. I mean, retweets were originally a user invention, right? Retweets were not part of the platform. Quote tweets, certainly. I mean, all these different tweet threads, which I think get into kind of that longer form. All these things were kind of evolved in the platform, and I think it was definitely in the right place at the right time. It would be very hard to I think reinvent any of that. And I also think that like you have this issue of if you have an ad driven model, you are going to want to drive engagement. And right now, these things are not smart enough to drive engagement without driving enragement, I feel. And I just feel like
we're not smart enough, or that's part of the human condition, right? That being enraged is the thing that brings back the engagement. So whether it's them not being virtuous or us not being virtuous, we land in the same spot.
Yeah, and totally, Adam. And I don't know if you saw Tim. It was in another piece? I think he wrote "Protect Me from What I Want." I think you had that or a line to that effect. Am I paraphrasing that correctly?
Well, right. I mean, the whole thing is that Facebook and Twitter and so on have built these models that they build huge ML models based on billions of data points. And these models have one function saying, which selection of posts should we put in front of this person to ensure they stay in front of the screen? Because engagement is defined as staying in front of the screen, so we can show ads to you. And it's not as though Facebook maliciously decided that, hey, if we show everybody right-wing trolls and stuff like that, that'll deepen the quality of the engagement. It's just that that's what the ML model produced. That it turns out that when you enrage people, sure, that gets them maximally engaged. And people can say, well, I don't like that, but the model isn't lying. It shows quantitatively.
You may not like it, but here you are. Yeah,
that's right. And that's why I wrote this other blog piece, because there's this huge debate is breaking out over in Mastodon land over whether there should be an algorithm. And well, of course, there's an algorithm. Sorting is an algorithm, even in a chronological sort. And and the algorithm currently used by Facebook and Twitter gives people what they want. So there's this conceptual artist named Jenny Holzer, whose main work is just short, pithy little phrases. And this is one of hers. I first saw it many years ago. I was walking through Times Square in New York, and there was this huge billboard up there, and it just had projected on it, "Protect me from what I want." And it felt like somebody was sticking a knife in my brain, because what a profound statement. It explains so much. And when people are saying, well, I don't want an algorithm, they're kind of saying, protect me from what I want. Now, we do want algorithms, okay? We want algorithms to improve the quality of curation and protection and moderation and all those things. But the fact of the matter is, in the context of a capitalist offering like Facebook or Twitter, the algorithm is going to operate in the interest of whoever paid to have it written. Nice thing about an open source based, federation based thing is people are just going to dick around and make algorithms because they're cool, or because they produce a feed that makes their dad happy or something like that. And that's great. I think we need algorithms. We need lots of them. And because nobody at the moment is smart enough to predict what's going to be the right one. So let's go and do that.
Well, totally. And have you? Because I have found that I am calmer when I'm at Mastodon. Like my feed, I like my feed. There's just more stuff in there that I find intellectually interesting, as opposed to being enraging. And I probably, in the Mastodon sense, engage with it less, because I'm more likely to get kind of off the site and read a blog entry that's interesting or what have you. But I like it a lot more. Has that been your experience as well?
Well, yeah, and on top of which, I'm only following like 1/10 or 1/6 or something like that, the number of people I follow on Twitter. So clearly the signal to noise ratio seems to be better.
Well, totally, and I'm amazed that people say that things can't go viral on Mastodon, but Tim, as I was writing that piece yesterday, I had to keep updating it with the numbers that I'm not going to say toot. I'm sorry. Apparently, they're getting rid of toot. Is that right? Like, we're not going to call it a toot. I feel like
they're fine by me.
They're fine by you. I know exactly. It's like, why would we be fine with a tweet and not a toot? I mean, I guess we should just suck it up. But I feel that that they're changing the name to something else. Maybe someone can tell us in the channel what I've been calling them posts. But it feels like that. I mean, that post kept doing numbers. I mean, and it kept you looked at how much that had been boosted. Because it is it's a lighter weight operation. I mean, I feel like retweeting something on Twitter is kind of a big deal. It's a heavier, I mean, it's obviously still just a click of the mouse, but it is a heavier weight operation than boosting it on Mastodon. Certainly, I boost more things. I mean, Adam, are you boosting more things than you retweet?
Yeah, boosting more things, I think in part because we're the algorithm, right? We're doing this for like folks around us. And I think actually that's how Twitter used to be before they started, the algorithm became much more heavy-handed and incorporating things like likes. And you remember, it used to be a heart rather than a star or whatever, or a star rather than a heart on Twitter. And I think that, we used to do this as a service for one another to fill in for the algorithm. And now it's been completely washed out on Twitter. So we're back to doing that service for one another, to being that curation, on Mastodon.
Yeah, what Adam says is right. And there's all these tools you can do, which will go and find all your Twitter followers on Mastodon and hook you up with them. And I totally haven't been using those because
You have not been?
no,
Oh,
not in the
wow,
slightest.
interesting.
Because
Oh,
all I
interesting.
did was follow a few people I knew, and then look at things they boosted, and then looked at people who were following me, and I've grown quite a different flavor of feed as a result of that than I have on Twitter, and I like it better. So you can just grow organically, and boy, the growth is fast. Like I'm up to like 7,500 followers or something like that over there, and that's in like 3 weeks. Um, and there's lots of people more interesting than me there too. I was looking at Anil Dash is already up to like 30,000 followers or something like that. Um, so things
Well,
can
yeah,
go
I mean,
viral.
I think it's great to
yes.
see, but I would say that my feed currently is more boring. Like there's interesting stuff that I get deeper on, but it doesn't bring me back. And I think this maybe is it protecting me from what I want, in a sense. Where like I'm following folks, I find interesting folks, I find interesting topics, but it is not yet for me, and maybe this is sharing too much about myself, the kind of obsessive what's going on question that I would have with Twitter.
Well, so it is definitely less of a news function. And that's
Yeah.
what I'm having to like de-wire in my brain is where I was going to Twitter for news and getting enraged as a side effect of that.
Yeah.
And I have so Adam, have you I know Tim deleted the app off his phone. Have you deleted the app off your phone?
Is this
I
an
have not.
intervention? No, I
No, it's
haven't.
not an intervention. I
I
have
have.
not.
No,
I have
you
not.
know
You're
what? I
among friends.
haven't.
I have not.
And there are a couple of voices on there in particular, like this guy Aaron Rupar and Asin Torbay, who monitor right wing media. Like, so I don't have to. That I look up like pretty constantly actually over there. So there are and then conversations about sports and World Cup and things like that that I have not yet found on Mastodon. But and maybe this to Tim's point, I'm also seeing a lot more shit in my algorithm that I didn't see and I really don't want to see. I'm seeing to me very offensive kinds of posts against people, against kinds of people, against protected class, like folks that I think are at the butt end of a lot of commentary, and all of a sudden that's creeping into my feed in ways that it never did before, and that's really hard.
Totally. Oh, I mean, it feels like my feed is like in a city where like the police force has been, or the people have moved out, and the thing is being ransacked. I mean, it is like my feed is nuts. I'm just getting the weirdest shit, and I get like tons of Elon Musk tweets in my feed.
I know. I'm like, in fact, I don't know if you've had this experience. Uh, you can click and say, I'm not that interested in it, and say, I don't want to see tweets from Elon Musk. That option is not available to me anymore. I don't know whether I've clicked it enough times where it's like, no, 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 we get it. But so finally, I just blocked him. But it wasn't even given the
Did you block
options.
him? Did you
Yes,
block him?
yes.
Save
Oh,
space. Did you block him?
if
That's
space, I
crazy.
100% blocked him. Yes.
I do not have anywhere. I do not have that self control. I can't. I should. I mean, I'm broadly. I have not yet deleted it off my phone. I am trying. It's actually I'm gonna have to delete it off my phone because I do have a muscle memory for it on my phone more so than I've got when I'm sitting at the computer. Um, but I have also Twitter's loss has been the gain of this bonkers local news app that I've got. I don't know if I my mom loves to watch the local news, and so she will. Do you ever watch the local news, Adam?
No, I don't even know how I would do that.
Right, exactly. This is kind of how I feel. And so like I did not actually know how I would watch the local news. So I think does it come on at 10, 11? I guess it comes on like it's broadcasted over anyway, don't know. So I found this local news app that I installed on my phone. And this thing now just like delights in spamming me. But in particular, this app has figured out that like, hey, wait a minute, this guy will click on any Elon Musk story we put in front of him. So between that and the best of dying Twitter, which is do you follow the best of dying Twitter, Adam? That is the one account to follow. Tim, I don't
Best
know
of
if
dying.
you
Is that a Twitter feed?
That's a Twitter feed, and it is good.
Okay.
It is really good. Yeah, it is. That is, it's just what it says. It's the best of. I think it's like she can only spell Twitter with. It is the. I believe it's the woman who did Best of Next Door doing Best of Dying Twitter.
Okay.
So that thing is definitely. So when I'm over there, it's only to kind of marvel in the destruction of it all. And then Adam, are you getting ads still when you're over there?
The ads are amazing. So first of all, there's like a new kind of ad that's sort of like a just follow me ad, click the big button ad, and I block anyone who does that kind of ad. But a recent one was a woman saying, "Hey, I don't want to. I'm just seeing how this ad platform works. Like, don't if you click this thing, like." Anyway, I found that very amusing. Some of the ads are getting so horrifying that they're like if you kind of wake up at 3 a.m. and the TV is still on. I mean, I don't have broadcast television anymore, so this doesn't happen to me. But and like some ad would be on. It's that kind of caliber. There was one.
I'm gonna put another flavor in here. I've actually seen some better ads, more interesting ones
Wow.
in recent weeks. I actually bought a Christmas present for somebody off an ad I saw for a quirky, imaginative product, which is,
All right.
normally Twitter ads were the safest brand stuff. Drink Coca-Cola, fly United, buy Apple. But it's clearly not in a healthy state. But one thing that Twitter is so great at that I would miss totally, and I hope Mastodon catches up on this. Is news, current breaking news story. Like, when the Ukrainian army breaks through and is marching across the grain fields of Kherson or Balyaklev or something like that. Wow, you can zero in on that in Twitter and you'll find out stuff way before CNN does. For
Totally.
sure. And I love that.
An earthquake, right? An earthquake is I would love to know what was the first earthquake that I went to Twitter before going to the USGS for. When was that? I've got no idea of knowing when that was, but for an earthquake, I'm always on Twitter to see if I actually felt that or if that was a truck going by. And so that will, yeah, Tim, I totally agree that's going to be. Do you see Mastodon as being on a trajectory to replace that? Because I'm not sure that it is.
Well, I don't think there's anything that limits the technology. I mean, one thing I believe strongly that assuming Mastodon keeps on getting traction, every news organization should have their own instance, right?
Yeah,
so, Sally at bbc.co.uk, right? Without this is the BBC Reporter, it's not in doubt, and so on and so forth. I would think that every serious news organization should do that. And there's nothing in the underlying protocols to keep that from working.
Yeah, we'll get that curation not from the centralized source, the Twitter was, but from these trusted news outlets that then you're opting into. Yeah,
that's right. But there's also Mastodon already can do hashcode following quite efficiently, and that's kind of that's how I was doing it on Twitter. I would hashcode Kherson and track the Ukrainian army. So I don't think there's any reason it couldn't. Will it? We don't know yet.
Right.
Okay, Brian, I did get one ad I just need to tell you about.
Yeah.
The ad is in quotes. Moore's law only stops when innovation stops.
Is that an Intel ad?
Intel ad.
Oh no, Intel. So Intel is sliding into dementia at the same moment that Twitter is sliding into 8chan. Like, this is going to get real weird if those two are going down together. I will say that I don't know how deeply Twitter needs to descend into 8chan before it loses the HPE, GreenLake, and IBM ads, but those two are still dominating my feed. Absolutely.
Those IBM ads, back in the late 1970s when I was an undergrad, I would read Datamation and Computer World and things like that. And the current IBM ad about, give employees access to your data is totally out of 1978.
Well, do you also get the identical twins eating hot dogs at the gas station IBM ad?
Oh, but digital doubles or whatever it is? Yeah.
It is like, this is one of these ads where it's just like, I get this ad, Adam, you don't see this ad. I get this ad all the time. And it's like Don't click on the ad. Don't click on the ad. I'm sorry. I gotta go click on the ad. And the replies are obviously great. I mean, the replies to the ad. I would pay for the replies to the ad. Actually, maybe that would be my $8 a month. It's just like having people just light up this ad for being ridiculous. IBM. What do you make? What do you make? Where are we? What are we doing here?
If I can interject for a second, Brian, I just want to say that this is a new system. So if folks want to join us on the stage, they can do a request to speak somehow. It's probably a button on your screen that's not on mine. And then as folks come up, if you join us, we might kick you off the stage quicker. But you're welcome to come back on, just because we have found that there's no good sort of hand system for managing a large group of speakers simultaneously.
Hey, let me raise a subject, and ask what you guys think, and maybe somebody else will join in. Do you think there's a place for a paid-for Mastodon instance, where for some small amount of money, $5 a month or something like that, you get it and there's no ads?
It's interesting. Maybe. The thing is, I view it kind of like Hacker News, where I consume Hacker News. I help create content on Hacker News. I don't pay for Hacker News. I don't know. I think it'd be interesting to know from a Y Combinator perspective if they view Hacker News as kind of a net neutral or a loss leader. I don't think I would pay for I would not pay for Hacker News. Brian, stay strong. You would not pay for Hacker News. Adam, are you unmuting? You.
Yeah, no, that's great. No, good. Stay strong.
Stay strong. It'd be interesting. I don't know that why am I so against, on principle, paying like $3 a month for? Although Adam, you may not have that objection. Do you?
So I'm paying. So I mean, I see the bus you're pushing me under, which is me paying $3 a month until recently for Twitter Blue.
Just relax and sit down right here in this bus stop. It'll be fine.
That's right. This is the street. This isn't a bus stop. So I did cancel that, just so you know. And but I'm paying on Patreon. I had to make a Patreon account for my Mastodon instance. So I am paying, and I pay for the New York Times. We pay for the Washington Post. So there's stuff in that realm that I'm paying for. So yeah, I do pay for a Mastodon instance, I guess. I'd pay for additional news curation, but I also pay for some independent journalists and stuff, because I like that kind of content, and I know what a shitty tough profession that is.
Yeah, so
I'm trying to imagine what the future looks like, and the obvious thing that if Mastodon really gets traction, what will happen is that Reddit will start talking the protocol, and you can follow people on Reddit on Mastodon, and your Gmail address will become a Fediverse handle, and all these things can happen. So I some of those people who are currently ad supported are going to stay that way. And then if you get a Mastodon account for being on Stanford faculty, okay, you're not paying for that, obviously. But is there something in between that? People who want to have an ad-free, progressively managed, tries really hard to suppress Nazis instance. Would you pay $5 for that? I would, for sure.
Yeah, and maybe this is like email, right? I mean, that is kind of what what you're describing is exactly the historical route that email took, and plenty of people did and do pay some number of dollars per month for email, and then plenty of others are willing to use Gmail or what have you, complimentary if you are an individual with limits. So yeah. Maybe that will be the future. Certainly, I think that recognizing, and Chris, I thought Nova made this great point, Adam, in our space in Oxide and Friends last week or 2 weeks ago, just about the folks kind of feeling that kind of civic connection with their moderators, that your moderator is not some faceless human, it's an actual human or group of humans. They got a particular disposition. And I think, humanizing that moderation, I think, is actually really important for us all to be on, because I think we need to be on better behavior also. It's can we maybe make this moderation problem slightly less burdensome by actually collectively being on better behavior? Isn't that possible? Can't we all just get along?
No, not in the slightest. Because
exactly.
Some people are garbage, and then there are organized attackers who are being paid to do it. And by the way, this is an area where Mastodon is currently weaker than Twitter. A substantial number of people from, the kinds of demographics get oppressed, people of color, gay people, trans people, that kind of thing, women, go over there and they start getting, really obscene, egregious abuse. Chanda Prescott-Weinstein, the famous physicist who's black and Jewish and female and loud, went over there and just couldn't stand it. She came back to Twitter. This is not a problem that's solved, and one that needs to be solved. It's, I would say, maybe the biggest outstanding problem in Mastodon right now, and I'm optimistic that we can build the tools to address this. But it's an issue.
Yeah, and I think so. Maybe this is a good time to get to, and I know folks have raised their hand. I want to get them on stage as well. But maybe this is a good time to get to some of Stephen's objections. Stephen O'Grady is supposedly at reInvent. I don't know. No, Stephen O'Grady's at reInvent, and I think he was trying to convince Adam Jacob to take on the role of the Mastodon skeptic. Although I wanted to ask Stephen, what position do you? Oh, here's Adam. So Adam, maybe you can channel Stephen. And although, again, I'm not sure what position he thinks that he's arguing against, because certainly it is my position. Tim, we'd love to know your perspective, but Mastodon, I don't think, is going to replace Twitter. In fact, I don't think there's a single replacement for Twitter. I think Twitter is going to be like the nightly news. I think it's just going to be something that goes away.
I don't think it's going to be something that goes away, but I don't know how much I can channel for Steven. That thread, he did summon me, and then I was like, I don't think I have an opinion, and then I fucking went off on a big rant. So apparently I did. I mean, I think there's a couple of things. One is the shape of Mastodon and the shape of a public square, which for as much as that gets bandied about, I think is what Twitter really became, is not the same. So, and when you think about it as one, what you wind up with is a lot of hyper-connected famous people that then bridge conversations. And so, especially in that middling tier famous, so I think about Kelsey Hightower a lot in the middle tier famous. He's about as famous as Laura Jane Grace, who is in a famous punk rock band and she can fill a venue. But she's not as famous as Scott Hanselman, who's about as famous as Sammy Hagar, right?
Scott Hanselman, you think is as famous as Sammy Hagar?
On Twitter, he is.
Wow.
On Twitter, he is. He has roughly the same number of followers on Twitter as Sammy Hagar does. His reach.
Nothing against Scott Hanselman, obviously, but that's high praise for.
I love this kind of hot or not metric. So, what musician has the same number of followers as you?
It's an interesting question. I have about half as many as Brian Cantrell, right? So I'm still working it out in bars, I'm beloved in the cult, but the thing about those numbers is when I read the Activity Pub paper while I was in bed drinking coffee this weekend, and whoa, how bad that's gonna work if you wind up with Kelsey back in the hundreds of thousands, and there's any kind of rational engagement. Whoa, it's gonna go so badly. And that's a technical thing. Of course they can fix it. Brian Cantrell, Adam Leventhal, and Tim Bray are on this call. If they decide they want to fix Mastodon, my belief that's going to happen is quite high. But the Twitter has this low barrier to entry. It did become quite reliable. That ability to then communicate with people who were outside your circle and had a reach that you didn't have, when you may or may not have known who they are. Think about all the people who their tech career took off in large part because they talked to people on Twitter they didn't know who were at that middling level of fame. And through that middling level of fame, they became known inside a much wider network that then allowed them to express themselves in a way that they couldn't before. That all happened for free. If you think about what happens, for Tim brought up the identity function of Mastodon, which I think is such a cool idea. but like, the amount of data and the size of an instance, like we were talking about, would you pay for Mastodon? Like, you're going to pay for Mastodon, or you better start paying for Mastodon, because the amount of data storage and the inefficiency of that protocol, like someone's paying for Mastodon. Like Chris Nova, God bless her, she's doing they just crushed. They got 25,000, I'm sure many more folks on that instance now, right? Like,
And one computer
God
company.
help.
And one computer
Yeah,
company.
God help her. God help them if Kelsey Hightower joins that instance, right?
Did you guys see this Jamie Zawinski piece I posted in chat called the Mastodon Stampede, where he's basically like DDoSing himself every time he links a blog post?
There's been several of those, and it's terrifying.
Yeah.
Let me speak to that. I when I published the Buy Twitter thing, it immediately got up on Hacker News, and at the same time, it was going around Mastodon. You should have seen my server logs. It was insane, because Hacker News gives you a pretty big traffic surge. Literally 3,000 or 4,000 Mastodon instances, all pulling it in. And it's actually, look, I love Rails. I think monolithic Rails applications are the right way to do things, within limits of scale and performance. But Mastodon is a monolithic Rails or stateful Rails application, and that's not correct. Okay, I think we can all agree that's not the correct implementation for that kind of thing. So yeah, you're right, but we will fix it. I mean,
of course they might, but like in the meantime, essentially the community I've seen leave Twitter for reasons that I think are, justifiably your own. Like if you can't support a world where Elon Musk owns Twitter, because now it's like a farm for alt-right Nazi trolls, like by all means, like leave Twitter. And also, like, we are leaving behind. Like, we have both the privilege of being able to leave, because as a group of people, like on this call are some pretty incredible infrastructure folks, right? Like Brian runs a computer company. Like, we know what to do, like, and we think it's kind of fun. So like, I'm stoked that I'm hanging out on Hachyderm. That thing's fun, right? I think it's great. It reminds me of bulletin boards, and I loved bulletin boards. Like, my whole life has been because I loved that moment. So I still feel pretty connected to it. But like, there is a lot of folks that we are leaving behind in that conversation in a way that I think is a real bummer. And when we talk about the sort of gleeful demise of it, like, it is fun to watch Rome burn or whatever, I guess. But there's a thing there that's special that I don't think Mastodon replaces. And I think Mastodon's own shape is interesting and fun. And I think it's like, I'm there and it's engaging. And also, we're losing something that mattered. And I think the idea that it can't be replaced, that's also sad. Like, and I hope it's not true. Like, if it needs to go away, and I'm not seeing it go away in other communities I follow, like the community I follow that's this community definitely is leaving. That was full of, SREs and ops people and distributed systems people and engineers and systems administrators and DevOps people, like, fleeing Twitter 100%. Every other part of the communities I follow, no.
It'll be interesting to see, because I think that it's also quite possible that there's just not going to be one answer for all communities. I mean, this is why when I say that Twitter is going away, what I actually mean is that the idea of having this single platform that is kind of catering to all of society is one that, and then when you try to monetize that, and when you monetize that by getting people upset, you are actually naturally selecting for those that are divisive to their marrow. I mean, I think when history is writ, we will view Trump as the Twitter president. And Trump...
Sure.
I mean, I don't think... Do you think that Trump could have risen to the presidency without Twitter?
I don't know. Probably. Like, and when I think about the, like for all of the Trumps that happened, there's a million other connections and a million other opportunities that were built and created for people because that public square existed and was a public square. And like, is everything that you're saying about the, like, engagement and, like, hate tweeting, like, how many long arguments have we had on Twitter, Brian? Like, just because it was fun and I knew it was fun as we were doing it.
Totally.
And like, and like, I think there's some truth in that, but like, one thing that Twitter still does better even with the reduced size of my feed, like my feed doesn't look like the ones you guys described. Like I'm getting ads still for sports stuff and for random content. Like it does not look like a weird, like bottom barreled ad hellscape for me, which doesn't mean it doesn't look like that for you, but it doesn't look like that for me. And like, I think I really think that there is a thing that we're losing, and that our willingness to abandon it, I think, is interesting. Like, and it's not because there's not a good reason to abandon it. I get it, but like,
I just feel like I don't know that I'm actually running away from it as much as I'm just finding that the interaction on Mastodon is so much better. Honestly, I think that the 500 character limit is. I mean, I'm just finding that I'm getting better engagement on more stuff on Mastodon than I'm getting on Twitter, and I think that like a lot of those discussions that you're kind of alluding to on Twitter, Adam, I think that those are that's Mastodon is actually a better spot for those discussions.
But that's maybe because right now you're seeing a pretty high degree of the in the know folks who are moving those networks, and they're actively engaged in it because it's like fun and interesting. But like, the reliability problems you see, like there's world-class SREs trying to keep Hachyderm alive, and it's not going well, right? And like those central instances, like all that stuff's going to have to be fixed. We'll sweat it, and it'll be fine because we're technical enough. We understand what's happening. We know what's going on. But like, I don't know that the slicing of that community in that way is to our benefit. I understand why you can argue your way into the fact that it is, because it sucks to get, I don't like seeing Nazis in my feed any more than y'all do. And like my desire to argue with them is incredibly high. And like, and it means I'm on Twitter all fucking day, like, hunting for the dopamine that comes from finding someone who says something wrong that I can then be a jerk to. And like, that's awful. And I wish I don't think that's my best self, but like, I don't know. I feel like the loss of that is meaningful. And while it's understandable that we're losing it, I don't think it was all bad. And I think there's a lot of folks who got a lot of value out of it and whose lives were fundamentally altered because of the shape of that network. And
look where we are. Like we started this as a Twitter space. We started it because it was a great community of folks to plug into, and it was exciting. And it was a new format that dovetailed into the existing format. There was a lot we like. So I agree with you, Adam. Just that this is, as much as there might be a Rome burning Schadenfreude associated with it, like this is a loss. And
I was in
we'll find alternatives.
Yeah, we'll find alternatives, but like I was in the community. There's a website called Meme Pool. I don't know if y'all remember.
Right? Yeah, Meme Pool.
But it was like Hacker News back in the day.
Totally.
And
yeah, definitely.
Joshua Schachter, who built Delicious later on. So he made the mistake once upon a time of building a mailing list for Meme Pool, and me and my friends wound up on this mailing list, and we took that joint over. Like it became its own subculture, completely disconnected from Meme Pool, and it drove Schachter nuts. He to the degree where he was like writing custom code to mess with the mailing list and like shadow ban people and add random footers. It was nuts. But that group of people like refused to budge. Like they just refused to get off his lawn because it was our lawn. The fact that he owned it was irrelevant. Like we were squatting. Eventually he just shut the whole thing down. He was like, these jackasses got to go. And so he just turned the mailing list off, and that was the end of that. And years ago, I met him in person and was like, hey, sorry about that. And he was like, that was you, But the reason I bring it up is I think it's interesting that our collective feeling of ownership over the public square is seeded, that Twitter was seeded so trivially because it changed ownership. The idea that your participation in that public square was linked to who owned it.
That is not linked to who owned it. You could not run this thing into the ground faster than he's running it into the ground. It's actually,
you know what? Cheers, Brian, but it's still. I'm not
totally
saying any of that was good or bad.
I was totally happy, by the way. In fact,
it's obviously bad.
I mean, we did a Twitter space on the night that he took over, and it was interesting to kind of get everyone's perspective on. And I was very happy to have the bull case. The bull case being that the supervillains are not released back onto the platform. Moderation continues. It continues to be a safe space. That it continues to be moderated. It can, and we begin to fix all these issues with it. I would have loved that. This is absolute malpractice, wall to wall malpractice. It is.
Yeah.
I mean, the what he's doing in terms of skirting regulation, decency. I mean.
Yeah.
To me, I mean,
And the idea that your
Swisher.
continued presence, but your continued presence on Twitter or not is like, we've turned it into a tacit endorsement. If you haven't left, like the number of folks I've seen say, "Oh, if you haven't left Twitter yet,
I'm not
you are
to that point yet."
I know you're not,
but we are getting.
But that point's happening quite a bit.
I'll tell you how it gets there. It gets there because Gab was a Joyent customer, and we did not realize what Gab was. They were just a customer that swiped a credit card, and it wasn't until the Squirrel Hill massacre that we realized that had happened on Joyent infrastructure. And the moment that happens, and we are not far away from that, by the way, where you have someone who is getting ginned up on social media to commit an atrocity. I don't know if you saw the news about the Moore video from Christchurch was uploaded and was on Twitter for hours before it was being flagged by the New Zealand government. We are close to that happening, and when that happens, you will cross a Rubicon, and that Rubicon will be Apple is forced to pull it, Google is forced to pull it, payment processors are forced to pull. We know what Gab looks like. We know what 8chan looks like. They are not businesses. So, I mean, I think it's a mistake to think that anybody is leaving Twitter because of its change of ownership. I am leaving.
I understand your point, and also I'll even grant you that it's happening. And like, this is very dangerous. This is a very dangerous position. I'm not putting myself on this fucking Twitter stage. Yeah. No, I just want to like make it known that like I'm way out on a limb here, and like everything in me is crying to crawl back on the other side of the limb. But I'm just going to stay here for one more second because Stephen O'Grady put me up to it, and then if it ends badly, I'm going to be like, "This is on you, buddy." But like, right. But like, the idea that there was there were many things that have happened over the life cycle of Twitter, and that life cycle of main characters and bad actors and poor behavior and social media corruption and the way the algorithm boosted certain voices over, like all of those things, like they were things that happened to us collectively, and that the continued existence of us in that place as part of the public square is part of why those things stopped. And the ceding of that power is what's happening right now by saying, look, this guy's a jackass. He did nothing but the most jackass of moves. It's allowing all of this awful stuff to come back. It's moving backwards from where it was, and the right thing to do is leave. Like, okay. And also, don't be surprised when what's left is the exact hellscape that you predicted. And you can congratulate yourself. And I'm not saying that that's the reason the hellscape will happen. Like, that's obviously not. You're not in control of Twitter. Like, that's not what I'm saying. But like, our mass decision that that's no longer a place for us means that everyone who would want to communicate with us, for whom that was the way that they got to us, it's no longer a place for them either. And that's a real impactful loss. Yeah. And that doesn't, and I don't think we're weighing that in the same way that it's very easy to get yourself self-righteous. And I'm like, self-righteousness is like my maximum drug. Like, if there's a thing I can channel for myself, it's self-righteousness. So, but like, oof, you know, like, I think there's something bad.
Let me butt in here briefly. So I don't think there are many people who are actually happy to see Twitter circling the drain. Speaking as somebody who just rage quit, I'm not. You know, I think that it's a tragic side effect of some of the pernicious aspects of capitalism, and it makes me unhappy. You know, my decision to walk away from it, okay, we can argue about that, but I'm not walking away in happiness. I wanted to address one little corner of what you said there, Adam, which is, okay, if you go to look around Amazon, it's a pretty geeky place. Or not Amazon, Mastodon. If you look around Mastodon, it's a pretty geeky place. Well, so was Twitter in its early days. So was Facebook, for gosh sakes, in its early days. Who were the first people to have computers were the geeks, and to get the web were geeks, and so on. So that's not a negative indicator at all for me. I think that it's perfectly reasonable to expect geeky people to be the first ones up on the beach of the new thing.
Sure, we always have been.
If somebody could figure out a way to come back, and there may be a way through the fire. I mean, maybe it goes into a nasty bankruptcy, Tesla stock crashes, Elon walks away, $30 billion poor. Somebody else takes over sort of on a caretaker basis. A lot of people come back to work there because, it was not that terrible a business. And Twitter eventually is reborn, but maybe in a more, I don't know, in a still useful shape. So it could happen. I wouldn't bet on it at the moment, but that would not make me unhappy.
Yeah, I would be fine with that. Just to be clear, I think that is going to be really, really challenging. And I have not deleted myself from Twitter. I'm still there. I have locked my account to indicate that my own dissatisfaction. Also, I was finding that essentially 100% of my new followers were bots. I mean, the irony is that the bot problem seems to have gotten way, 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 way worse in the last couple of weeks. So I have locked my account for that reason. But yeah, I would welcome. I mean, it would be fine for me if Twitter pulled out of its nosedive. I don't think it will. I think that it is when I don't know that Musk has worked in a truly declining company. It is really, really, really hard because every quarter is worse than the one that came before it. Giving up this much top line, I think, is nuts. And I mean, the war that he's about to pick with Apple, I think, is very ill-advised, to put it mildly. But if he can somehow come out of all this, fine. I just don't think, as a practical matter, that I just look at my own teenagers, and as I wrote yesterday, my teenagers view my kind of being transfixed by what's happening with Twitter as I might view someone else after LinkedIn is purchased. If Elon Musk were to purchase LinkedIn and drive it into the ground, like, I wouldn't even register with me. I'd just be like, all right, I don't know, I got to fine.
Sure.
And that's how they view this. And I think that the Gen Zers are already post Twitter in terms of post this centralized spot for all social networking, and they're already on their own Discords. They're already on. My 15-year-old was asking me why we hadn't done this on Discord a long time ago. I actually don't have a good answer for that, so I don't know. I'm not sure what the. This is part of the reason I think that it is just structurally not something that is going to be really accommodated by the future. This kind of single spot, in part because the incentives were so misaligned. So Adam, I totally agree with you that it gave us great things, but it also gave us some not so great things. And then it is more that it is being, the way that it is being run now is just, I mean, just remarkable. Every time I think it's like, okay, now I've seen truly there's nothing else. Like, okay, no, never mind. Okay, no, there's something else. Toasterson, I know you're here. I want to get Toasterson here to Adam, how do I? There we go. Did you do it?
Thanks. Bye.
Okay, you bet, Adam. Yeah, good. Great talking with you.
Thanks, Adam.
I hope we can still argue on Twitter.
We can argue on Mastodon. It's all good.
That's good. Okay, that's good.
Yeah, I'm gonna argue wherever. I'll come into Discord. It's gonna get nuts.
Arguing? I didn't view them as arguments. I viewed them as discussions.
No, we don't really argue that much. I was just using it for rhetorical.
Okay, phew. All right, that's a relief. I was a little bit worried, actually.
Yeah, no worries. You're wrong about everything, but other than that,
awesome. Thank you. How do we kick him off the stage?
Party shot.
I'm moving by.
That's right. Toasterson, what's it?
Okay, let's see if this works.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I actually wanted to bring a bit in the European view because in Europe we've been using Mastodon for a bit longer, as we have now. We had for a longer time the data protection issues with the US. So we already have government instances going. So the German government has an instance going, which has a lot of associations and things on it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yes, because, and I do think this is a dimension in which Europe really led the way. Because I feel, Tim, I was like you, and I think Adam, you're the same way. That I joined Mastodon whenever it was a top hacker news story in 2017.
I literally have no recollection of joining it. Like, it must have been in a fit of insomnia or something.
Or you joined it in your sleep. You know, did I tell you that my 15-year-old
I guess.
ordered a pizza in his sleep? Was the did I tell you this?
Yeah, in Europe there was a tech conference, the year ends conference, the Congress, C3 Congress, and it was heavily advertised there. So we have for the Computer Congress instances with a couple thousand people on, and apparently there is also some other performance metrics that they are finally writing up now from a lot of hosting providers that we have here. We have the small associations that pretty much run it. And I know a lot of Swiss like associations have been active from the very beginning. Now with Musk taking over, this has been like, now also finally the Americans have joined us.
Well, look, we're on some things, we're leading the charge, and other things we're a little thick here. So I'm glad that. So yeah, and is your so your take is clearly that Mastodon's got a pretty good future, and I think it sounds like you're expanding on what Tim was saying about the kind of the different instances really becoming different kinds of identities.
For one, the other thing that we're trying out right now is how much we can get away with hacking.
Interesting.
A friend of mine recently has added the Mastodon JSON routes to Pelican, so the static block site. So you can get away, even if you don't have a server, you can basically have people follow you on your blog, and then they see the blog posts in the timeline. And the fun fact is the protocol ActivityPub does not have a character limit. This is a Mastodon instance setting that you can set up. So you can actually, you can also get the article type, which then gets you this giant part with the read more in the timeline. And technically, this was fought for blocks, and I'm thinking about setting up my new block software to see how much JSON.
That's awesome, Tim. This is reminding me of. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So Matt Mullenweg says he's going to put the protocol in Tumblr, so Tumblr becomes essentially looks like a Mastodon instance.
Tim, do you remember us adding the tweaks that we needed to dtrace to allow a Descript to generate an RSS feed? Do you remember this?
I do not, but I can believe it.
No, because this is your idea. Do you remember this, Adam?
Yeah.
Because Tim, you had this idea of like, hey, it's like, could I have a Descript that it generates an RSS feed? And we're like, and there were some silly things was preventing it that we fixed. And we're like, all right, great. Now we can have a dtrace script generate an RSS feed. It's like, what would we use this for? And Tim, I remember you just being like, I don't know, but it seems neat. Like, it does seem neat. I don't know what we would use it for. I don't think we've done too many RSS feeds with, but yeah, to your point, Dustin, about these open protocols do allow us to plug in different things. And so, Tim, do you think that the Mullenweg thing, I mean, that kind of thing could be a real game changer if you have a big player do that?
In my experience, when Matt says he's going to do something, he does it. And, he's been pretty close to the Tumblr team. So if there was a good reason why that wasn't possible, I kind of suspect that he wouldn't have gone ahead and said that. So I expect that'll happen. And I expect a lot of other social presence operators are going to be watching that with close attention.
I saw Don McCaskill talking about, because Don McCaskill, I think, owns Flickr right now. Am I making that up? I think that's right.
Yeah, he's from SmugMug, but SmugMug bought up a bunch of the other photo sharing things. So yeah, he has Flickr.
He's got Flickr, and so Don has been talking about actually adding what it would take to take ActivityPub and get that. I mean, so there's a bunch of interesting stuff happening out there. And so yeah, and so Tim, where do you kind of see things in 3 to 4 years? I mean, do you? Because I think you can also paint a picture where Twitter pulls out of its nosedive, but Mastodon and the Fediverse and ActivityPub still flourish. That's actually not impossible.
Well, I'm also influenced by my experience with Blue Sky. So I was in the early Blue Sky conversations with Jack and Parag and those people. And they were saying, the actual business of just lining up feeds and delivering them and tracking follows and likes and so on is boring. If there's really business value add there, it's in curation. and filtering and things like that, and abuse prevention. And they say from that point of view, we would win if we opened up Twitter to be a protocol peer of a whole bunch of other people, because that would give us more stuff to make money by providing a high quality service on it. I thought that was a very compelling line of argument.
Yeah.
Now, Blue Sky seems to have kind of been sidelined by ActivityPub as it hurtles by, but here's the thing. Clearly, there is a hunger for the kind of things Twitter did, right? And that's not open to debate. And it seems that there's a good chance that the provider, Twitter itself, is flying into the side of the mountain. And it seems very, very unlikely that any other single entity will be able to step in and assume that role, which by a process of elimination leaves Federation.
Yeah.
And email, despite its being based on fairly clunky protocols, scaled to the entire human population and huge traffic rates. ActivityPub is really a lot like email. And so I think that by a process of elimination, we're going to end up with something federated, filling the important functions that Twitter did. And right now, Mastodon and its buddies are the leading candidate. So I have no hard data, but that's my
There's a couple of data points here to add. One of the creators of the ActivityPub standard is further enhancing the standard still. So there is stuff coming down that pipeline also outside of that standard. So there is a little bit of a embrace extend going on from side of Mastodon. And apparently the standards creator now goes the other side, where they have like an experimental standard and then have more things they can add to the spec of ActivityPub.
Interesting. Well, Tim, I think that those pillars are definitely those three pillars that you mentioned, that Twitter is valuable, and that this is a served valuable function, and it seems like it is not going to, quite possibly it is flying into the side of the mountain, as you say. Feels that feels pretty indisputable, and that it's going to be something else that comes in and fills that void, because it is valuable. I think that's definitely important. I want to get Raggy. You get up here. I know Tim's going to have to split here in a little bit, but maybe you want to, if you've got a closing question or comment. Or did I? Oh.
Just click the button and it is thinking about inviting Raggy up. Oh, here you are.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of add in here. There's a lot of concern around scaling the Federation side of things, but it actually really looks like push messaging and push services right now. And when I think about the kind of what would it look like if news organizations took it on, an interesting option would be, well, the way that ActivityPub currently works, you could actually get a paid subscription and they could post the paid subscription to your inbox. And the cost of doing that is no different from them having their own app and pushing a push notification to you. Mm. So I'm not sure in all cases that it scales worse.
Yeah, interesting. Well, and I think also one thing that I definitely do love about Mastodon is, and Tim, I don't know if I can't remember if you picked on this in your blog entry, but some of these apps that are trying to replace Twitter that then don't have any web accessibility, that seems just bonkers to me, because all of this.
Yeah, that was JW pointing out that.
I mean, it's isn't the web a good idea? I thought we agreed that one was a good one. Wasn't that a keeper? I thought that was in the keep pile, but I don't know. It feels like that's another that when you kind of opt in, because Raggy, I think part of what the point you're making is that when you opt into these broader ecosystems, you get to leverage a bunch of it. You don't have to have a dedicated app for the Washington Post. You could actually you've got a different way of delivering that same functionality.
So let me say, before I go, let me say a couple things. We've got a pretty geeky audience here, so let me go all geek for a sec. Mastodon has an API. It's a nice API. I went and looked at it. It's got excellent documentation, lots of examples, reasonably straightforward, no big abstractions. It's something anybody could. I closed the tab quickly because I do not need another programming project at the moment. Item 2, ActivityPub is pretty simple. It's a well-written spec. It's easy to figure it out. I encourage anybody who isn't frightened of reading specs and thinks, hey, maybe there's something unique I could do on this, to go and read that spec. Okay. Third thing I want to say is Mastodon itself, as I said, is a stateful Rails implementation, and not a small one, and not a simple one. And I think there would be a real steep learning curve to getting into making contributions there. And also, as I've said, I'm not crazy about the idea of Rails as a supporting architecture for this. There's another implementation of essentially Mastodon of ActivityPub called Pleroma, which is implemented in Elixir, which runs on the Erlang VM. And then there's a fork of that called Akoma, which is the same, only better in some respects. And that strikes me as an immensely better sort of programming platform model for building this kind of thing, which is all about shuffling messages around, lots of them in parallel. Well, hey, Erlang, that's what Erlang is for, and it works great. WhatsApp runs on Erlang, RabbitMQ runs on Erlang, and Elixir is a really cool, ultra cool programming language. So if I were a bright, eager geek who wanted to maybe get in there and do something interesting, I would probably go start by looking at Pleroma. So there's my technology contribution to the evening.
Well, those are great. And as you know, I often tell people when it's easy for us to kind of look back at the past and to think like, boy, I wish I'd been alive then, because it seems like such, and as I always tell people, it's like that's happening all around you. You're living in a new golden age. It's for the things that are forward looking. And I think we're living in a new golden age of federated social. And Tim, those are great recommendations for technologists to go check out. And I'm gonna hopefully I'll be able to close the tab quickly, but I want to go look at that. Adam, have you looked at the API, the Mastodon API?
No, I haven't checked it out. I'm got another tab where I'm looking at it right now.
That's awesome.
Be careful.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great note to end on. Tim, thank you very much for joining us for our inaugural post Twitter Spaces space, or whatever noun we end up using. This is recorded and it will become the Oxide and Friends podcast. And folks, if we'll definitely leave the channels open here for a little bit. If people have, we're going to leave the stage here, but if people have thoughts for us on how we're running this, we'd love to hear them. But thank you so much for all of you for joining us for our inaugural Discord Oxide and Friends. It's been a lot of fun.
Oh, before you close, there is a huge body of traffic in the chat that's attached to this.
Yes. There's a lot.
Yes, we've been keeping an eye out. People have been answering their questions, annotating with some of the things we've been talking about. I've been keeping an eye on it.
And we're going to leave that open for a little bit here, so if folks have got kind of parting questions. But I think we'll leave the stage. Adam, thanks for setting this up. And also, huge thanks to Steve Glabnick, who's been helping us out and educating us about what's a joystick versus a console versus whatever this icon is.
And if you go to the welcome channel, it gives instructions for how to subscribe your calendar or whatever if you want to pick these up. If you're not following us on Mastodon or missed the notification, that's a good way to get notified of future ones.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Tim.